Yeah, so let me say a couple of things about this. First of all, I appreciate your kind words about the administration. Obviously, I think it was the right thing to do for us to start the process of negotiation. I think for too long, the Russians, the Ukrainians have been fighting. Obviously, there's been a lot of people dying on both sides. There's been a lot of innocent loss of life. And our view is it's absurd that you've had this war go on for so long, and the two sides aren't even talking constructively about what would be necessary for them to end the conflict. And I think that one of the things that President Trump has always been very good at, and he's gotten a lot of criticism, unfair criticism, in my view, from both the American and some of the European press, is what I would call a strategic realism or a strategic insight. In other words, you don't have to agree with the Russian justification for the war, and certainly both the president and I have criticized the full-scale invasion, but you have to try to understand where the other side is coming from to end the conflict. And I think that's what President Trump has been very deliberate about, is actually forcing the Russians to say, here is what we would like in order to end the conflict. And again, you don't have to agree with it. You can think that the request is too significant, and certainly the first peace offer that the Russians put on the table, our reaction to it was, you're asking for too much, but this is how negotiations unfold. And I wouldn't say, I'm not yet that pessimistic on this, I wouldn't say that the Russians are uninterested in bringing this thing to a resolution. What I would say is right now, the Russians are asking for a certain set of requirements, a certain set of concessions in order to end the conflict. We think they're asking for too much, okay? And then obviously, the Ukrainians matter a lot. They're the other side. They're the other party, at least, to the direct conflict. And we have to ask, what is the Ukrainian? What do they need in order to bring this conflict to a successful completion? And we're going to continue to have that conversation. Now, what the president has said is that he will walk away if he thinks he's not making progress. And I think that, about once every 4 or 5 weeks, you will hear some American official, or sometimes multiple American officials, say, this is a week where we need to make another step. And in particular, the step that we would like to make right now is we would like both the Russians and the Ukrainians to actually agree on some basic guidelines for sitting down and talking to one another. Obviously, the United States is happy to participate in those conversations, but it's very important for the Russians and the Ukrainians to start talking to one another. We think that is the next big step that we would like to take. And why does that matter? The reason it matters is because, again, I mentioned the Russians, but also the Ukrainians have also been they've put a piece of paper in our hands that says this is what we would need in order to bring this conflict to a successful resolution from our perspective. And there's a big gulf, predictably, between where the Russians and the Ukrainians are